Hello everyone, New Thread 12 here, and welcome to my thoughts on Down the Rabbit Hole. Wow, this story's getting a little crazy. Hopefully I'll be able to stay on top of it. But I want to talk about what I think's going on, who I think is doing some stuff, and what's the nature of some of these characters. I want to start off and go ahead and talk about the easiest ones to do, which is Kagamine and Gasa. They're clearly not alive. At this point, I think it's safe to assume that both of them are not real, and that anyone acknowledging them as real is either part of one person or also not real. And I'm going to be focusing on chapter 2 itself, not the prologue. I should just say chapter 1 then. I will be focusing on that rather than the first one, because we already have some evidence to suggest that that was just a fantasy and not real. So I'm going to only focus on this world and not disregard the other one, but take it with a grain of salt that when people interact with others, it's not as it seems. So the way I see Kagamine and Gasa going is that they're representing someone in Yuki's life, someone very important to her. And for this, I think it has to be a sister type character. We saw a flash of a young girl very, very briefly who said something that we couldn't make out. There was no text, and it almost sounded like it was reversed. On the roof when Kagamine and Gasa were eating lunch together before she went out and saw Taku-ji for like the first time. Or at least when he was crazy. And that would have been the first time, not crazy. And it was just a very, very brief moment. But I think that is who Kagamine and Gasa are both represented by. I think they both are one person. And I would say Kagami is probably the more vocal outer shell of said person, while Gasa is the inner side and maybe more closer to the real person, I should say. I think this person got into an accident and probably died, and this has left a lot of emotional scarring on Yuki, which causes her to see these delusions and try to put her sister into the world, even like that she's still there, which is why Kagamine and Gasa are always around her, and why no one's really surprised when they see him, but they don't interact with them, much like the student in Yuki's classroom when she acknowledges the pair, but not as humans, just as the pair. This implies to me that she knows they're not real, but it's important to Yuki, and that she always brings them around. Anyone who acknowledges Kagami and Yuki are going to share the same experiences and same brain as Yuki, because no one else is going to be able to fully understand and comprehend what Yuki or what Kagamine and Gasa represent to Yuki. Thus, anyone who can interact with them must be part of her head. I say this because there's no way I can interact with someone's, let's say, an imaginary friend, without being inherently connected to that person. There's just no way I can fully understand it, because Taku-ji clearly talked with Kagami, and Kagami clearly talked with him, and he wouldn't be able to do that if he just knew that it wasn't a real person, just a doll. He wouldn't be able to have any form of conversation, know what Kagami would say, unless he knows Kagami, and in this case, the true self of what Kagami represents. Thus, Taku-ji is Yuki. Yuki is Taku-ji. I also say this because every time they're around each other, they get this, or Yuki gets this blinding headache, and not around usually other people. It's whenever something, I guess, challenging I should say, arises. She got a headache up at the lunch when she did see that little girl that challenged something in her. Seeing Taku-ji clearly challenges something about her. I'm not sure what it is, but I assume that it's a type of dual personality, a split personality caused by very, very deep emotional scarring. And it also could stem from the fact that Taku-ji is bullied a lot because he has no friends. So, when all of this stuff happens together, when you have a loss of a very close family member and you have emotional trauma inflicted upon you, you got to cope in some ways, which explains the first chapter. That's a coping mechanism of escapism, retreating out of the world and acting like the world doesn't exist at that point, that it's just you, it's all these other things aren't going around you. And Sakura was bringing him back, saying, no, you have to come back to the world. It was a form of escapism that I believe, I don't know who's the first one, Taku-ji or Yuki. I'll probably say Taku-ji. I'm 90% sure Taku-ji's the original person in this case. So I'll probably just end up referring him to Taku-ji or him. But we see Yuki bring him back into reality and not try to escape from all of his life and everything that's going around him. I think it's interesting the way this is done so far. I like the way it's handling escapism, and I hope it delves a little bit more into it. With the way Taku-ji and Yuki interact, I just can't help but think that Yuki is everything he wants in someone to be around. She's intelligent, she's respected by other people, she's more vocal, outspoken, smokes, screws off around class, no one really cares. I think this really indicates to Taku-ji wanting that kind of lifestyle, because he's very unsatisfied with what he is doing, how his life is. Another piece of evidence to the whole Kagame not being real, Gasa not being real, when the teacher was telling him to sit down, no one else was being told to sit down, it was just him, while other people in the classroom were standing up. In this case would have been Kagame, Gasa, and Yuki. But it was just, you sit down. You need to sit down. And I think this helps to point to that Yuki and Taku-ji are one person. Because he would have said, everyone needs to sit down, not just you need to sit down. Because other people she came in late to the classroom when there was already yelling. And I just think the way that scene went, because he didn't really care about Kagame and Gasa in that instance, when it would have been kind of obvious that he should have been yelling at both, but he wasn't. With the way Ayano's handled, she almost seems like a type of omnipotent being. I'm not sure what she represents as of right now, but she's definitely another part of Yuki's head, an imaginary force, because she's dropped too many I only know what you know and all that stuff without anyone noticing her. She always disappears out of nowhere, only on the roof, only when Yuki's alone. All of these things just really indicate that she's just a part of Yuki's head. And another thing, knowing that the little anime girl, Riruru-chan, I don't remember her name, the magical girl drawing on the wall, she knew exactly where that was. But she only knows what Kagame knows. Thus, Kagame has to know what Taku-ji. I cannot remember his name. She has to remember what Taku-ji had seen. So they share a mind right there. Because Ayano really shouldn't have probably noticed that if she only knows what Yuki knows. That she knows all of these things, and inherently Yuki knows these things as well. So to me, that indicates that, yet again, they are one and the same. The little girl in Taku-ji's home and his mother were very odd. Because how you would assume that, he would have, that's his sister. He might have two. Which is where he gets that kind of twin personality, I guess. Maybe Scott is based on the living one, while Kagame is based on the dead one. I highly doubt it, though. I really do. I think they're both based on one girl. But it's very much possible that they're based on two. They did have two sisters instead of just one. And that, the doll in the very first part with Kagame is actually, like, the doll that Kagame represents is actually his sister who's injured, dead, whatever. I'm going to just assume dead. It's the easiest one. It is his sister's, which is why it would make sense you'd carry that around. But I don't understand why the destruction of the doll. That's what's the most confusing to me right now. I don't know why he would. If it does in fact represent his sister, why would he destroy it? That's what's interesting and challenging to me. I can only assume because she challenged what he was doing in his mind that he knew his sister would object to it, and that's why he decided to do it. But to call your sister a whore is pretty rough. You have to really not be enjoying her if you're going to be calling her a whore. And there's a lot of things Taku-ji's doing that I just don't understand right now, and I need more information off of him. The way some philosophical things are being handled are really interesting. The way sometimes Ayano brings up stuff is very interesting, and it's interesting to see how Ayano views something and Taku-ji views something. With the way Taku-ji arrives to conclusions is just so backwards to some logics and reasonings, just basic fundamental ideas of it. With the whole, if I make 3 predictions and all of them come true, that means my theory has to be correct. The way he arrives at that conclusion is just so backwards to how the way reason and logic works. It's very interesting. His whole concept on avoiding death and everything, and now we should be focusing on it instead, is also interesting. But I have a feeling that stems from the idea of actually wanting to die. Because I think he has a very miserable life. I think that explains a large majority of his actions. That he is just so depressed, and losing Zakuro, who I assume is a very, very important part of his life. One of the last important things of his life, I should say. Because I doubt his mother has any form of love for him. She just types on the computer all day long and just stares off into space. So I can't imagine he has a lot of fondness for his mother. We never saw his dad. He could be dead, or he just left because she's crazy. He grew up in a type of cult-like environment, so it's almost natural that he would want to have a cult around him, because that is what he was forming right there. It was just a very cult-like behavior, that he's the savior, everyone needs to follow him, and if they don't, they're going to die. If they follow him, they're going to die anyways, so why do it? That's the problem that people don't get when they're pushed into a corner and don't see what's going on. They wall off and don't think, which is what the problem was. They didn't think logically, like, yeah, this guy's just screwing with me. All of these things is stuff he could do. And once you're in that type of heightened sense of fear, it's not really going to dawn on you that you could think your way out of something. I hope we get more of things that happened before, because I need to know more stuff. I need more philosophical reasonings. I need to know his true relations with Zakuro. There's so many things that are just left open that I don't understand right now. And I only can speculate on. The giant number, I'm still working on it. Still going through factors. I want to see if I can factor that down. See what gives me what. All the different square roots, if it has one. What's cubed, anything. Anything that can work on that. I just have a feeling it's something important. Maybe a date. I actually haven't even considered that it could be a date. But it has to do something with Yuki and Taku-ji. I refuse to believe it's just a completely random number. I will keep cracking it until something comes up. The end of the world, I can only assume that represents the collapse of Yuki's mind. With everything just going to hell. I imagine that represents just the collapse of her mind. Especially Taku-ji dying as well. That she just didn't know how to handle it anymore. Because I do think Taku-ji is the body. So when the body dies, the mind's going with it. Kimika, I want to know how he got her to follow him. Because he mentioned that she was another one. But we never saw him driving her into a corner. So I'm curious to what he did to her. Okay, I'm not curious enough to know like if he did anything screwed up with her, but I am curious to know what her deal is and how he got her, convinced her to just do whatever he said. I'm curious to know what exactly is going on at this school, because there's a lot of things that are just said that haven't been really shown, like Zakuro's bullying. What exactly took place? How many people actually knew about it? Obviously, a lot of people knew about it, but how many people participated? How many people didn't care? Same with Taku-ji. I want to know the numbers that are involved here. There's not enough substance in a lot of these cases. And it's really just driving me up a wall. So I'm really hoping this next chapter really starts diving into the thick of things. And I'm looking forward to it. I'm a little hesitant because, we're going down the rabbit hole. It only gets worse from here. There's no way it's not going to get even more insane, because that's just how a rabbit hole works. Eventually there's a bottom, maybe. And hopefully I'll be able to make it to that. I probably will, let's be honest. I'll be fun. It would have to really fuck with me to not keep going. I will carry on through anything that this thing can throw at me. I can guarantee that. But I just need something. I need more. It's just so vague right now. We only get some hints and clues as to the nature of Yuki and Taku-ji. We still don't know what is going on with Zakuro. What is all of these things? I still don't know. I can only imagine that it's informed by the anime she watches, the delusions in her head to justify why she is suffering. Because I think that's probably where most of this comes from. I think her suffering is driving her to assume that there is something deeper going on, that, they're not doing this because they're just shitty people. It's because they're infected by this thing. They're not doing this because blah, 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 blah. It's a very common coping mechanism that it's actually not their fault. It's just this thing. They're not actually terrible people. And it's very common, sadly, because usually it just ends up that they're really shitty people and that they don't deserve to have, excuses made for them. And I don't want to see it per se, but I want to know the true nature of why Zakuro feels the need to protect these people rather than kind of just screw them off. Because I think her whole, bug thing isn't real at all. I just don't believe it. I think she's just trying to justify their actions. And not that it's their fault, but blame it on something else. And I think that's a problem. And I think Taku-ji wanting revenge for Zakuro is just continuing on with her delusions. Because I think that's where most of his actions stem from. I think it's a response to Zakuro's death. Whether it be a rational response or a completely irrational, and his psyche's just broken from losing the last person who really cared about him. And I think that's probably the more likely of the scenarios. I don't think it's natural or a natural, rational decision like, yeah, I'm going to create a cult and kill everyone. I think it stems from him just being broken, just a complete snapping, because he was there. He was there when Zakuro killed herself. He saw her hit the ground. He was on the ground level, and probably in shock, confusion. That's when he took a picture, because she probably told him to. That, oh, take a picture of what happens, of what's flying. They didn't fly. The question then becomes, how complicit were the other two? They seemed pretty okay with it, which is kind of confusing. Maybe they were just doing it trying to cheer her up and not realizing she was actually serious. And the reason they were being so hostile towards Yuki, they wanted her maybe not to get hurt, because they could have assumed that Yuki was going to hurt him even more. But I'm not too sure. That's the problem. I need to know who those two were and how they relate to Zakuro, and what's the real connections there. How much do they know about Zakuro? Do they actually believe her? But I think all of those things that she said were all coping mechanisms to explain everything going on around her. It was another form of escapism, just completely shutting off the world and retreating into the idea that no, it's not them. It's this bug thing. It's an alien. It's the end of the world. It's not that. And it eventually drove her mad, which ended up driving her off a roof. I don't think the first guy's death has anything to do with it. I bet it's just an accident or a suicide. I'd assume it's an accident. I don't think it's related at all. I think all of these are completely unrelated, isolated events that have no bearing on each other. I think the dude falling off it is probably an accident, complete 100% accident. Didn't have anything to do with Zakuro. With Zakuro's death, I think it had everything to do with the fact that all the bullying drove her insane, and she ended up falling into her delusions and falling off a roof. Senagawa, we already know what happened there. He basically pushed her off, and essentially he got her to basically jump and fall off to her death. And this is how you explain all of these things, and they're completely isolated. Well, I shouldn't say completely isolated, because the second and third feed into each other. If Zakuro doesn't die, then no one else has to die at that point. But Taku-ji, feeling broken, destroyed, and completely alone, feels this need to get some form of revenge, some form of justice, some form of closure for himself, and that they need to somehow pay for their actions, for what they did to Zakuro and essentially to him as well, because he's so connected to her. I think we will get in the next chapter a little bit more information on the true nature of the relationship between Zakuro and Taku-ji. I hope. If not, I'll be really disappointed, actually, because I want to know that. I really want to know more about those two together, rather than more adventures of Yuki. Sorry, Yuki, you're interesting and all, but I kind of want a little bit more about the story right now. I want to know about him. I hate him right now, but at the same time, I'm interested. I can hate someone and still be interested. And no matter what I say, just because I hate someone doesn't mean I don't like their character. I do want to make that clear really, really early on. hate the person, love the character. If for anyone new viewer, I will say a lot of times that I hate said person. That doesn't mean the character is poorly written. I just want to establish that I can love the way a character is written. It doesn't mean I love the actions they do. Yuki's a pretty well written character right now. I don't like half the action she does. I think she's really stupid with some of her actions. Taku-ji, I hate him. I really hate him. But damn, is he a good, well written psychopath? Because I think part of the story is going to be following him from normal Taku-ji, all quiet and meek and really lonely, with only Sakura, to when she dies, and then when he snaps, when he completely loses it. Because I think following Yuki, we have to follow Taku-ji. We're part of the same person. We have to eventually follow him. Also, the criteria I have for the mind and for if a character is real or not, whenever these kind of stories comes up, I do want to just establish this. I have to ground them into the world, either through their own mind or through the interactions of other characters to them. It's the easiest way to. When they show independent thought and decision making, that's how I know that they are at least a rational thinking being. Whether they're in one mind or not doesn't matter right now, but the point is that they are alive. So we already know Yuki is alive for 100%. If we see Taku-ji, we know he is technically alive as well. It doesn't exclude that they're in two separate minds, but it establishes that their two existences are real. When people don't interact with other characters at all, it raises a big red flag for me that they don't exist. When that student said, "Oh, you brought the cute pair," it did raise a pretty sizable flag in my eyes, because I had a sneaking feeling that they weren't real. No one's really mentioning Taku-ji and Yuki together. No one sees them together. No one really acknowledges that they're together, which is an indication to me that they're probably not two exclusive people. And any other character moving forward, it will be the same thing. I imagine if that anime girl becomes real, the crawling chaos, I swear to God. I don't know what I'll do anymore. I don't know. But I do want to see more about Taku-ji. I want to know how he ticks, what ticks in his head. And I'm looking forward to starting this next chapter. Tomorrow I'll go ahead and start it, and we'll see what is at the bottom of this rabbit hole. And what's the title of it? Oh, fuck. It's my own invention. That's the title of it. See you guys next time. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a great day. History repeats itself. We are going back in time. Good. The first time as tragedy. The second time as farce. Karl Marx, the 18th Brumaire of Louis Napoleon.